Personnel selected, Dave, toy restoration expert and YouTuber. Channel codename toy-polloi.
Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we're going to be trying to repair these vintage M.A.S.K Ravens with the driver Calhoun Burns. Now I've got 3 of the Ravens here and they all are in a bit of a sorry state, and I'm hoping out of these 3 we will at least be able to make 1 good Raven, maybe 1.5 Ravens, depending on what pieces are broken and what we can salvage. It's quite a unique vehicle that turns from a car into a seaplane, and it has firing discs that should fire out of the front, and it's got a few other little sort of things that pop up, and as with all M.A.S.K vehicles, those little mechanisms do tend to break. So it's going to be an interesting project because I've never taken one of these apart before, and everything we do today is going to be new for me, and it's going to be a bit of a learning curve, but I reckon we should be able to get at least one of these working. So let's get on with the project. So I've just brought in one of the Ravens so we can take a look at it and see what's broken. It should have 2 doors. One of the doors is fallen off, and that's because the little bracket that holds it in place there has broken. And looking at the other Ravens that I have, those have broken as well. This one has been previously repaired. It's got a bit of paint over it, and this one here is broken in a slightly different way. The top part of the hinge is broken off. This one's the side part. So I'm hoping that we can amalgamate the two to sort of fix that issue. But yeah, there should be 2 doors, and those open manually. You just have to open them like that. There's a little sort of jet section at the back, which if we press this button, that should pop up. It's a bit flaky on that one. We can try some of the others and see what they're like. A bit flaky on that one as well, just a bit sticky. And we can try it on that one as well. Oh, that one works perfectly. So it's going to be sort of a case of working out why this one works better than the others. Then we have this front section here, which if I press this button on the side, this front section should flip over. Oh, which it does on this one. Some of them are a bit more sort of temperamental, so that's another feature there. All the wheels sort of rotate in and rotate under with these little sort of gun bits that flip up. But the main feature on this is a disc firer on the front. When you pull out this back sort of switch here, that sort of cocks it. There's a button on the front, and when you press that, it sort of launches something and should fire out a disc. I've got some replacement discs on order, but yeah, I think on at least one of these it doesn't work particularly well. That one's all right. Oh look, well that one you can see is locked in place. So there's sort of bits of everything wrong with these. Nothing is quite working, and they are all a little bit dirty and a bit sort of rusty. So the plan is I want to pick one as the one that I really want to fix up and make the sort of as best I can. And I'm going to amalgamate the parts out of all of these to make one really nice one, and we'll fix any issues we find as we go along. So this is the one I'm going to pick as the best one. It's missing both doors. You can see that there's damage here to where the doors join on, but overall, apart from being play worn, I think this is the best one. So we will start by taking this one apart, and we'll see what needs repairing and what needs replacing, and sort of work it out as we go. So yeah, let's get on and unscrew all the screws and see what happens.
Toy-polloi. That is incorrect. Try again.
Okay, so let's get started. This is the one I've chosen, as I say. It's got one clearly broken part there, but I think we can salvage the top section of this one to replace that. All of these are very dirty, and normally I would clean the toys before I start, but in this instance, as we're going to have to sort of strip them down completely, I'll clean them once everything is in pieces. So let's just start undoing the screws and see what happens. There's 2 parts to this toy. The front section here, I'm going to say, is one part. It's just going to have a sort of mechanism that joins the 2 pieces together, and then we have this back section which has 4 screws on it. So I'm just going to undo the 4 screws on the back and see what happens and see what pings out. Often with M.A.S.K vehicles, when you undo the screws and take the thing apart, things go everywhere. So I'm going to be quite observant as to what happens. So let's just see. Okay, that's all the screws out, and I can straight away feel that there's something wanting to push this back section apart. You can see if I let go, something is wanting to push that apart. So let's gently remove this top piece and see what happens. Okay, I think it's just the springs that launch this rear section upwards. I think that's what's pushing those 2 pieces apart. So let's remove those 2 springs, if they will come out. Nope, those are locked in place. We have this middle section here, so let's just lift that up and see what's doing that. So that is the seat. Oh, see, that's what I say, everything tries to fall apart. So let's see what was going on there, see if we can work it out. Actually, from the rusty patches we can work out exactly where all these pieces go. So that's the launching mechanism for this front piece. There's a spring here that seems to have come out. Where did that spring come from? I'm going to have a little think about this, but it should be quite easy to work out. There's a spring here. Ah, right, I think that is just a compression spring that goes in there. And there's a little hook here that catches on that. Okay, I can see where everything needs to go, so that's not so bad. It wasn't as sort of scary as I thought. I've just been having a little play off camera just to make sure I understand how it all works, and it seems pretty straightforward. So we can go ahead and take some of the other versions of Raven apart. I'm going to leave this front section for the moment. Let's just deal with the rear section. So this rear section is not in bad condition. This doesn't have anything broken. I was trying to work out if I can actually get these wheels off sort of easily. They do appear to clip in place, but I can't see any way of sort of unclipping them without bending the plastic a lot. And I'm guessing when this was first made, the plastic had quite a lot of flex and it was easy to push these things in. Now I would be a little bit more cautious about sort of trying to remove them. So I'm going to try and pick the best sort of rear section with the best tyres and the sort of least damage to the chrome. We can always touch up the chrome if it's an issue, but yeah, I think trying to pick the best of all of these is going to be the sensible option. So let's take another one apart and see what's wrong with it. This one I think is again pretty reasonable, so let's take this one apart. This one here doesn't appear to have a broken top section, so we need the top of this one. On this one I can see it's broken, so I'm going to put that to one side as a sort of, it will be good for something but not for this project, so that can go to one side. But we need the top section of this one, or possibly the top section of that one, whichever is least sort of damaged, which I think in this instance is this one. So let's take it apart. We'll grab this section as well, and then we might as well move on to opening this front section as well and seeing how that works. Now it looks to me on these that as this toy in the cartoon is a sort of boat plane or submarine, that a lot of the time these toys have been put in water, which is why all of these pieces are rusty. You can see every screw and every spring inside that one was rusty, and it's just the nature of this sort of toy. If it's designed to go underwater, or if in the TV show it's designed to go underwater, that's what a child will do. So I think this has just ended up in a lot of water, but we can clean that all off. This section here is got a lot of rust on it and quite a lot of wear to the tyres, but I can see that this part here is broken where the little clip is. It probably could be repaired with a bit of black styrene and some plastic weld, but in this instance I've got a good one over there, so I'm going to just swap this out. So this can go in my pile of broken pieces that may be useful in future, but for the moment I'm not going to bother fixing that one. I've just taken apart this third one, which is the most broken. It looks like someone has tried to repair this in the past with various bits of plastic. In fact, some of it is falling off there, and I was wondering why this sort of launching mechanism, the bit that launched the discs out, wasn't working. That was stuck in the sort of the out position, and when I've opened it up it's quite clear that someone, I think, has probably been inside this before and replaced the spring, and they've just replaced the spring with a spring that is far too large. So that's the original spring. It's a tiny little spring, compression spring, and that was the spring that was in there. So it's a much thicker sort of gauge wire. It's also really short and just a bit wider, so that original spring fits in very nicely in that little slot. This new one that was in there, it's sort of squeezed in. You can see it doesn't actually fall out, so it's just too large a spring, and I think it's just locked up the whole mechanism. So it's interesting to see these sorts of things. Someone has previously had a go at this, but not to sort of fixed it and made it work again. They've had a go with whatever spring they had to hand, and it just hasn't worked. So that piece again, I think is going to go in my sort of spares pile because bits of it are broken. I probably could fix it, but for now, yeah, I'm not going to bother. So that's one for a future job. But we certainly have enough pieces here to make at least one good one. I was hoping we'd make two, but I just don't think we have all of the parts unless I do some repairs to this, which, I might do it because it's going to be fairly easy just to make a new little piece for that. But yeah, that might be for a project for another day. Now we come on to these front sections, and there's not a lot going on in here. We've got the disc firing mechanism, which is this piece here. That pulls out, that's pulled out by the rear mechanism, and it just sort of fires forwards. On this one I can see that that is completely jammed. There's no way of getting that out. So we're going to have to take one of these apart anyway, just have a look inside. I wanted to pick the best of these, and I actually think this is the best. best one, although there is a bit of scratching to the front section there. It's not too bad. The chrome is really nice, so that is going to be the one that we put on the final vehicle. But let's just take a look in here and see why this one is broken. It might give us some clues, and it might even be fixable. Sometimes it will just be something pretty obvious, but let's open this up and see what it looks like. I can always salvage some parts from this one anyway, because it might be that that top front piece is in better condition. Yeah, it's marginal, but it might be. So let's open that up. Right, I can see we need to take that spring off. Just unhook that there. That spring comes off. Let's open up the front of this and see what it looks like. Oh, it's really simple. So you're basically pulling this sort of slider back, which grabs onto the disc, and then when you let go of it, it pushes the disc forward and fires it out the front. And then we've got this little plate that the disc rests on, and that's slightly spring loaded just to hold it up off the bottom. Oh, that is incredibly simple. Yeah, again, very rusty though. You can see this one has been in the water, so we've got a rather large, strange shaped spring there, but it's a really soft spring. And then yeah, we've got a spring on this piece here. I wonder why that was stuck, because there's no particular reason why that should be stuck. Looks pretty free moving. Maybe just got knocked out of alignment. But yeah, again, pretty interesting. So I'm going to take the other one apart that I want to use, and then we'll go and start giving everything a good clean and getting all of this rust off. So here are all the good bits. I've taken everything out that I can. I've got a little couple of pots full of rusty screws and springs, which we will clean later. But now the first thing to do is actually give everything here a good clean. So I'm just going to use some hot soapy water and brush it over everything, give it all a good scrub, try and get as much rust off as I can. There are a few metal bits still left in here that I haven't bothered to remove. This little switch here that unhooks the front end and allows it to spring round. There is a little spring in there that I've left. I could remove it, but I just don't want to lose it, so I'm going to be careful not to get that piece wet. Everything else possibly is all right, but I'll sort of double check as I go and make sure that I don't get too much water on the sort of the key parts, especially parts where there are stickers like the door. So I want to keep those pretty dry. But yeah, basically everything has got to have a good clean with some hot soapy water, and then we'll let it dry, and then we can start trying to reconstruct this. But I'm pretty hopeful we'll get one really nice one out of it, maybe half of another, but I'm aiming for one really good Raven out of all of these pieces. While the plastic parts are drying, I've just taken the time to remove some of the rust from these springs. You can see that's one I have now cleaned. I'm using a contact cleaner, which is basically a sort of glass fibre bits in a little pen, and you can scratch the surface and it removes the rust. I've also got some fine grit sandpaper, and I'm just using that as well, just to gently sort of brush it off. You can see the sort of the difference you can get. That's one that I've started working on, and that's pretty much how it started. It takes a little bit of time, but it's well worth doing. So I'm going to carry on and clean the rest of these. And by the time I've done all of that, the plastic pieces should be dry, and we can start putting the Raven back together. So we now need to start putting this back together, and I've chosen the best bits of the front section, and we can just reverse the process of taking it apart. So we have this little spring here which tapers upwards, that goes on the front there. We have this little sort of platform, which is what the firing discs rest on, and as you can see, I've got some firing discs. These are 3D prints that I bought off eBay. There's a few people selling them, and I bought a few of them. They're actually not too bad quality. They are a few sort of print lines on them, but the overall effect is pretty good. So we can actually test this once we put it back together. So this little sort of resting disc goes on the top there and lines up. So it's just slightly sprung to raise that disc up. Then we have this section, which is the bit that sort of pushes the disc out of the front. We take this long spring here, and that pushes over the top of that. And then this is where it starts to get a little bit complicated, because we have to sort of hold everything in place. So make sure that that plate is in the right position. There's a little peg in the middle that you've got to get it lined up on. We take this piece and it has some grooves that go on the top section, and then you can see here there is a sort of plastic rim, and that needs to go inside this little box section here along with the spring. So we have to put that in there. That's essentially the stopper so that this doesn't fire too far forwards. The spring goes completely in that box section as well. So that just has to stay like that. Then we can hold everything together, hopefully hold everything together, and we'll get the top piece here, and that just goes over the top of everything. I'm going to change my hands around just to make sure everything lines up, like so, which it does. That's all good. So that should be spring loaded. And then the final thing is we have this little coiled spring here, and you can see there is a sort of a piece of the wire that points inwards, and there's a matching hole just on the side there. So what you've got to do is drop this over the top here, and then get that little piece of the spring in the hole just by sort of bending it out of the way. It's pretty straightforward to do. Just hook that in there. And there we go, that's the whole thing back together. So we've now got 4 screws to put in. I'll put those screws in and we can actually test that this disc fires. Even without the rest of the car, we just need to pull that back, and if it fires out the front, we know it's all working. So let's put a couple of screws in and then we'll give it a test fire. Okay, so that's the front all together. It does look like a car. Let's test this. I'm going to put one of these discs in the front here. We can pull this lever back. When the car is together, you pull this whole lever back and it sort of locks in place. So we just push that disc in, and I'll just hold the lever sort of in the back position. And if I let go now, hopefully the disc will fire out, which it does. So that is all working. We can now move on to the next part of the Raven. Okay, we can go ahead and put this rear section back together, which is a little bit more complicated just because there's so many parts and so many springs, but it shouldn't be too hard to do. So we'll start with putting this little clip in. We have this sort of short fat spring here which goes over this post, and then this clips onto the underside of the sort of main seat backs, just like that. This is the mechanism that releases this rear fin and makes that spring up. So once we've got that in, we can just put it to one side. We then have this tiny little spring here, and that goes in this hole in the middle. We've now got a sort of more complicated piece, which is this section, which is this is the release for the disc firing mechanism. So this is a sort of the cocking post for the disc mechanism, and that's the release. So we have to put these two pieces together. That one sort of clips through there, and it's sort of all interlinked. So when you press that, it releases this one. And then we have a long, thin spring here, which is this one. And that has to go in this slot in the middle at the front, but also hook under this. So you've got to sort of hook it under there and put it into the gap. It should be possible to do, so let's just do that. And then you've got to line up a post on the bottom of this middle button into that little spring that we've already put in the bottom section there. Let's see if that works. Which it does, and hopefully everything will just about stay in place. So we can now bring in the front of the car, and you can see on the middle spring there's a little hook, and that needs to go in a little gap on the sort of left hand side there. You can just about see it, there's a tiny little gap, so that has to hook in there. The rest of the spring goes in the sort of main hold, but that little spring sort of hook goes onto one side. So that's starting to come together, and we need to pull that middle post just slightly out to get it to lock in position. So that is starting to hold together. I think I can just let go of one hand and it shouldn't ping out too much. We can then get the seat section, and that should drop over the top of everything. Make sure all the posts are lined up and all of the switches come through. And hopefully that will just clip in place with a bit of sort of wiggling. Make sure everything is lined up. It's a bit awkward this. I don't want any of those springs to fire out. There we go, yeah, that's in place. So that should have a little bit of a sprung motion. That should have a little bit of a sprung motion. And in that bottom bar, I don't want to pull it too much, but that should be spring loaded as well, which it does feel like it is. So yeah, I think that's fine. We can now put these two springs, if I can unhook them, onto the back posts there, like so. We'll get the two doors and those slot in there and in there. And then we can put the top section on and screw everything together. If we can just get those two springs lined up on that rear section, like so. Oops, and make sure everything is lined up. Pop it down, put that door back in that's just fallen out, and squeeze everything together. Yeah, that is looking good. So if I put the 4 screws in underneath, we should be able to test this. Right, so that's the screws in place. So let's give everything a test. If we press this middle button here, the rear spoiler should come up, which it does, and that locks in place nicely. That's all working. If we press this button on the side, the front section should spin round, which it does, so that's all good. We can then cock the disc firing mechanism by pulling that button out there. I can hear it click, so let's put in one of the 3D print discs in there, and we'll do a test fire and see if that still works. Yeah, that is still working as well. So that's everything on the Raven working. Do the doors open? They do, and those ones hold in place. So yeah, that is a complete Raven. I'm now going to make a quick sort of modification and repair to the remains of this second Raven. You can see there is a small piece missing there, which means that the door won't hold in place. It should look like that. So I'm going to make a bit out of some styrene sheet and see if I can fashion something to fit in there. Then we can get this second Raven together. Even though I'm missing one door for it, it'll be sort of 2/3 complete. And in the future, you never know, I might find another door. So yeah, let's just make that quick repair and see if we can get that one working as well. And so here we go, here is the finished Raven, and I'm really pleased with how it's turned out. It's a little bit wabby-sabby around the edges because all 3 of the Ravens I had were pretty well played with, but it does all work and it does transform, and that's really what I was after. A vehicle that does everything it needs to do and will look good on display. And I now actually have the remains of 2 other Ravens that are in pretty reasonable condition. So hopefully if I find more parts I can complete those as well, but for now they will go in my spares box. Otherwise, everything is working on this Raven, and the replacement discs that I bought, I'm pretty happy with. These came off eBay. They are 3D prints, and there's a few people sort of selling them. I think these cost about £10 for 4 of them, but they really do work particularly well. So let's give it one final go of this actually firing. So I have to cock the sort of firing mechanism at the back, pop the disc in, and let's see this one fire off. Yeah, that works incredibly well, and for that sort of price, if you lose these, I wouldn't be too worried. They're easy to get again, so a very useful sort of replacement part there for your Ravens. Hopefully this video has been of interest to you. If it has, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video, and thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching Toy-Polloi. Subscribe for more great videos.